Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for August 1st, 2022. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about today. It is episode 114, and I have back with me for the second time he's been on the podcast, and I really enjoyed our talk the first time, and I really almost wish I hadn't stopped recording when he and I talked the last time, because we almost did a second podcast, which was more interesting than the first one we did. It's Joaquin Flores of New Resistance, formerly of Fort Russ, and other publications around the sphere. Joaquin's a brilliant geopolitical analyst, and I consider a peer in every way on this. So a man that I learned from all day long. So Joaquin, thank you so much for showing up today. And how are you?
Tom, thanks. Beautiful introduction. I feel all at home, and I appreciate the. It's always good. Great. Yeah, we had great. Actually, another conversation earlier today. No recording of it. It also would make its own episode. But no, I'm down for this.
All right, excellent. So I reached out to you last week to try to get this thing scheduled, and when I was thinking of, and it's something that's been rattling through my head for the last few weeks, and it's been shaping some of the writing that I've been doing for Behind the Paywall, which is that I'm beginning to see, now that we're into August, that there's a lot of events that are coming together for late September. That late September period has just a ton of very interesting things that are going to occur. And being that time period after Labor Day here in the United States, 6 weeks out from the midterm elections, we have that moment where, there's always the possibility of an October surprise, because this is that time of the year. So from a market perspective, from a geopolitics perspective, I see a lot of events coming together around the late September period. And I just wanted to have a chat with you about what you think. I think I know what I'm seeing. I was wondering, what are some of the things that you were seeing, and see if we can, brainstorm some things that we can look for coming into Q4, basically. So.
Well, I mean, whenever you talk about events shaping those things, you look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, of course, and I imagine that's why I'm here today. So I would say, I would say that when the campaign actually started into the thaw, actually the special military operation go back to the last week of February.
Mm-hmm.
So that begins in the kind of the thaw out of winter.
Right.
And then when you get into the end of the fall, you get kind of into the November area, you kind of get back into this, but now you're working against time.
Right.
So all kinds of things that probably are inevitably going to happen, such as Russian military operations in about 4 more regions.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these may operate simultaneously.
Okay.
In particular with, for example, Kharkiv in the city, Kharkiv or Kharkov, if you will, and the Dnipropetrovsk region are probably in the same theater, and that probably goes together based upon experience with, folks are following the campaign, over the Severodonetsk and the whole thing that happened, and the Lysychansk and the big Ukrainian defeat, and kind of based on this, looking at that and how long of a time did that play out, what was necessary to set up, how much time is left before, because we have the winter coming.
Right.
And it's not just a military winter. This is also a time that would be opportune to settle a peace early enough to have negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
And those are always going to be based upon the facts on the ground, Tom, as you already would know, and your audience would appreciate. Lavrov has reiterated numerous times, unqualified and without any difference in his posture on it, that Russia is going to engage in any outcome negotiations based upon the facts on the ground, not based upon the initial offer that they made in March.
Right.
And Russia alleges that Zelensky walked away from a deal brokered by Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Of course, I find some of Russia's, rationale or reasons for everything questionable,
mm-hmm.
But at any rate, we have a situation emerging today, which is not suggestive of Russian withdrawal.
Yeah, no, I don't see that either. Absolutely.
Right. So you have then in the South, you're going to have Mykolaiv and Odessa regions go together. So in the same way that the Dnipropetrovsk and the Kharkov region go together in operations, you're going to have Mykolaiv and Odessa in the southwest go together naturally. I mean, we're talking about adjacent regions. And also, we saw like 3 weeks ago a reminder from a unit been training called the Free Odessa Army or the Odessa Brigade, that you can see that there's a armed wing of a separatist movement, or naming the battalion after the region can suggest a number of things, but they certainly, just to pivot on and, jump in at any time, Tom, but just to pivot on that question, I've suggested that the future Russian operations might and ought to rely more upon a reminder of the uprisings that took place in Kharkov that were foiled 8 years ago. And not try to look like the way that Kherson was done, that it was staged, managed overtly under the Russian military administration with activists who want to join Russia under the Russian military occupation. But then the converse of this is, does Russia have enough intelligence control over the military decision makers in the police and in maybe the military in Odessa, so that it is safe enough to simulate an uprising in which the organizers and followers are not slaughtered in the streets. Unless that slaughter is a necessary martyrdom for some other operation, but I don't.
Yeah, I mean, given the way the Russians have prosecuted the war to date, and you can salt this analysis to taste however much you want, but it's pretty clear that they have gone out of their way to minimize civilian casualties. So it makes sense then that they would only put together, some kind of, quote unquote fake uprising that would allow for the local population to not get slaughtered. It would make sense that if they didn't have that infrastructure in place, that they wouldn't do it. So then the bigger question is, I can see I don't follow the war on a day-to-day basis. I don't go through and look at, troop movements and all this stuff on a day-to-day basis anymore, because I find that that's actually kind of getting lost in the weeds. The better thing to do is to look at what everybody is saying, look at the high level, and while looking at the maps and everything else, and realizing
maybe from week to week, but not daily.
Look at it's the same thing that happened in Syria back in 2015, right?
Same thing.
Once the Coeris air base fell outside of Aleppo, Syria was no longer really a day-to-day operational thing. Same thing with the 2014 when the cauldron at Gorovka occurred. That was kind of the end of the daily the daily grind as to whether or not the DPR LPR forces were going to be able to survive, yada yada yada. So we're kind of in the same situation now. The battle line has the quote unquote line of contact or amount of territory that is pretty much hardened. The question now is whether or not the Russians are gearing up for a late September offensive, but there's a lot of smoke to say that they are, by softening a lot of targets behind the lines, by making numerous missile strikes into Odessa at the port and in other areas to take out, radar and ammunition dumps and all the rest of it. And so that's all that your classic kind of softening up before a potential invasion. And I saw something about large column of troop movement to the north, I think in Belarus, the other day.
Yes, they have. That's right. And I mean, Russia's recently signed like a 120-day agreement about the port of Odessa and about just an agreement about, in short, their activity there and what it amounts to. But they asserted that same day they're right in war, whatever the hell that is, right? But they're right in war to strike military, whatever Russia will claim as a legitimate military target in Odessa, right? And it's an institution, it's a government, it's an intelligence organization, it's an army, all of whom have histories of lying to people about things. So I don't look at, what I'm saying,
right? Of course.
I mean, I'm not a Russian patriot. You know what I mean? And I'm not Russian, so I mean, it's just
Right.
so it's not my case to make. But
Right.
what I do look at is, that Russia is going to have to create uh, a connection between the murder of the 40 or 50 people in the trade union hall in
Yes.
Odessa 8 years ago
Yep.
to a kind of a resistance partisan movement or something,
Right.
like the French underground or whatever, and kind of simulate this kind of thing. And they're going to need that. But in reality, it's going to be a lot of, amphibious operations from Mykolaiv and land operations through Transnistria, on the front of Moldova and Romania. They just announced that an agreement with Romania for Romanian forces to operate militarily from Moldova.
Right.
So this is obviously escalation. You had threats made from the Ukrainian president's office spokesperson or whoever he claims to be, Arestovich, more of like an entertainer or something. But at any rate, he was making threats at Transnistria, right? And those never materialized. All things point towards the need to have, this 120-day agreement in terms of the grain issue takes us into November, but you would have but that doesn't confine, as Russia asserted, the scope of their military operation. They even got the office of the president of the Secretary General of the UN to suggest that Russia was in the language of the agreement when it acted militarily in the port of Odessa. In terms of the Odessan local kind of under oligarchy of the millionaires who own multiple shop fronts and stuff like that in Odessa, maybe small chains and businesses, they're looking forward to a Russian-controlled Odessa just because of the security of the banking sector, if anything else.
Right.
And the inflation versus their local currency is out of control. Everyone in Ukraine who has more than maybe $500 or $600 is not keeping it in Ukrainian currency. They're buying euros. They store euros in a euros account, and now they're seeing the euro fall fast against the dollar in recent weeks, and where we are now.
Yep.
And you've been keeping up. You've been actually forecasting the long game behind this for quite some time. So I think when you look at around the period between, I guess in the States, it's like back to school and Halloween. You have all kinds of fun activity coming up for that fall.
It's we're the rule on Wall Street is selling may come back after Labor Day because everybody's at school and everybody's on vacation and there's not a whole, so invariably during election years there's always this possibility of a large amount of market volatility because liquidity is low, right? And we've seen some of that.
About midterm elections in the States,
and then we have the midterm elections coming up in the fall. So all these things, are coming together for late September. So once we start getting closer to here's the gig. We've got Powell's meeting at Jackson Hole in late August. You've got the Fed's meeting is on the 20th and the 21st of September. You've got Italian elections, snap elections on the 25th. And the Italian elections, as far as from what I think, as much as we've kind of discussed the situation with the potential for a Russian offensive, and if there is I agree with you, if there is going to be one, it has to be no later than the late September in order to, take as much territory as possible between now and when winter sets in, so that they can sit down to the negotiating table from a position of strength. So whether they can take
because it's also the issue of Europeans, heating needs and stuff, and even though they're already they're supposed to already have or collected for that, you've heard news or people maybe have seen today that number one, the German Interior Ministry chief, that minister has said we're ready to actually engage with Nord Stream 2. That has never been turned on, if need be, to solve our energy needs. And now, that's crazy, right?
Now, the interesting part about that is that the guy who said that, I saw that over the weekend. Yeah, very busy weekend for me in the house. But one of the things I did see this weekend was he said that, and I went, and my first reaction to that was, that guy's from Delinka, so that he doesn't matter. When it comes from a German Green,
Right.
official, then it matters, right? What he's
Right.
doing is he's now what that guy is doing is trying to prep the narrative and help industrial
There's
forces
elections
within
and stuff. He's making
within the
statements about,
CDU and the SPD
yeah.
to rise up against the Greens. Until the
Right.
Greens in Germany actually break ranks, I don't believe Nord Stream 2 is on the
No, it's not. It's not gonna. It's not. But to say that they are to remind people that there's not a construction thing that's
right.
going on, or
No.
there's nothing. There's just Germany not turning it on. That's the
Right.
issue.
It's
and then and that's different from Nord Stream that has like this turbine repairs and what's going on, and then it find out that Ukraine's been withholding gas.
Yes, I was about to make that point. Yes, you're absolutely right.
You mentioned. Well, I don't know if this is before. Maybe we talked. But you were also talking about before we recorded. But you were talking about, I think, Germany and Italy having a row over
gas. No,
yeah.
When I uncovered, my friends over at Mittelchino went through the gas storage numbers, and I wrote about this in a blog post a couple of weeks ago, as part of the proximate causes to why Five Star Movement moved against Draghi and eventually brought his government down. Which may not be the complete read. I did a thing with Alexander Mercouris of the Duran the other day, and he was telling me that Draghi actually purposefully torpedoed his own government in order to try and split Five Star. Italian politics, it's like the eigenstates of Italian politics are murky.
Yeah, no, it's a different game of cards. So
yes, it really is. It's like it's Calvin ball politics,
yeah,
right?
Right.
So like it's. Truly,
yeah, no, right. It's
so I look at this and I thought about this, but what happened? What they uncovered was that the EU was saying that the Italians have enough gas when the actual gas storage numbers were far lower than that, and the Germans were basically siphoning the gas, and Draghi was turning a blind eye to it. Stogit, the major gas storage company in Italy, they were on a 37% village run rate for the end, or by 40% stored back in late June. And then once people started talking about this, and once Draghi was recalled, remember he had to come back from the big NATO summit to try and stamp out the political unrest that was happening, that was beginning to percolate up. He had to come back from the big NATO summit. All of a sudden, and for a while, the Stogit numbers were removed from the internet. We couldn't get access to them. And then they come back mysteriously, and all of a sudden the run rate on how much they're filling Italian storage facilities exploded to the upside, so that the Italians may actually now have enough gas to get through the winter. But they were clearly, Draghi and the Germans were clearly working together to starve the Italians of gas in order to destroy their economy, force them to accept EU stimulus money, which would tie them to the European Commission in perpetuity. And just destroy the economy, and then at the same time, probably sever the very deep links that exist between the Italian and the Americans. And I think that this is another angle on the Italian government situation that most people don't understand. There's 100 U.S. military bases in Italy. It's a very big deal, and that these roots go way, 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 way back. And any attempted coup against Davos has to come from American support, even if it's just behind the scenes.
Right.
I mean, it would never come out. It would never come out into the open, right? No. But it would always be, kind of. So in my mind, the way I've been reading this, and I again, I've talked about this. I said, to me, Five Star Movement doesn't move against Draghi after the men who are in charge of Five Star, who betrayed that movement to the club in Rome. I use that term loosely on purpose. I use that term on purpose. The Club of Rome, that club, right? That because Davos is just an extension of all that rotten nonsense. And
So right. When talking about the Malthusian stuff and population,
yes, exactly, absolutely. So when you think about this, like those guys, Giuseppe Conte, and would never make a move like this. And then you have poodles like Salvini, who'd been completely crushed, and even Berlusconi and Forza Italia. All of these, all of these parties that had basically been forced to submit to the mafia in Rome during the last couple of years of these governments, all of a sudden stood up and walked out and destroyed all of Draghi's plans. Now, they don't do that if there's not somebody more powerful than Draghi standing behind them. I mean, that's the point. It doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
I think it's the Fed and
it's there
in the United States. I happen to think it's those guys because that's what reads. That's the read that I have on what's happening. And that there's a big fight at the central bank level for control of all of this. That's my read. I could be wrong, but that's been my thesis, and this supports that thesis. It supports it on the ground that these guys would have never done that, because once that government in Italy falls, and it falls without their equivalent of Build Back Better failing, right, then you have the opportunity now for snap elections in late September to blow up the entire European debt market and really unwind the situation. Right now, the market is still kind of believes that Christine Lagarde, they just don't want to believe that the European Union is going to fail. And we're staring it in the face. Every once in a while, you hear some talk about the credit markets, spiking their bets on Italian redenomination threats. Right, we see that in the credit markets every once in a while. But Lagarde always seems to be able to bring that back from the brink. Well, until when? I don't know. I mean, the last meeting was from the ECB was disastrous. We're going to raise rates and have unlimited QE at the same time. Like, really? Like, how do you get away with that? And and I honestly think that what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, they're just saying, we're going to make more, but it's going to cost you more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, okay, we're going to print more. We're going to betray the German people to bail out the Italians, while we're raising your cost of capital because we have to in order to keep our credibility and not be a clown show. Well, you are a clown show. And the reality is every time the Federal Reserve turns around and is hawkish and makes a hawkish move, it puts another period at the end of the sentence. No, really, we're serious. We're not pivoting. No, really, we're serious. We're raising rates. No, really, we're serious. We have to do this. No, really, we are just trying to destroy the ECB. That is every time these things happen, you can see another tranche of investors move into that mindset, and you can see it in the way the markets trade afterwards. And right now we're getting a big rise in the price of gold. We're getting a big, and what's really happening is that now everybody is going, I don't know that anybody's making any sense anymore. And so now that's when we're finally starting to see some movement.
I mean, we're seeing it as rises in price for these things, but you're saying beyond the general rise in price, like inflationary, or
what we're seeing is capital fight. We're seeing movement. Right? Yeah, there's a pool of capital out there, and it's starting to move out of Europe, and it's moving, and it's a vote of no confidence against. I think of it this way: you don't have to be good in global capital. You just have to be better than the other guy. Right? This is the kind of thing. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to be faster than the bear. Right. Same kind of idea. In the great game of global capital, you just have to be the guy who treats capital slightly better than everybody else does, and all the capital will flow there because investors, will chase that quarter point, that 5 basis points, that 20 basis points. That's what they do. And especially in this environment where, real returns are so hard to come by. Real returns, not nominal returns, real returns over inflation, so hard to come by that everybody's behavior is very erratic. And so this is why when I put all of these geopolitical and market forces together, it's very easy for me to see massive shifts in these, occurring over very small outcomes. So this is why I keep looking at the Italian election going, does everybody not understand that the brothers of Italy, if they take power, and the possibility and they're now finally coming to the conclusion that the center-right coalition in Italy could take a supermajority of seats. They may only command 45% of the vote, but because there's no coalition on the quote-unquote, establishment left, because it's been atomized, they're going to take, British politics-wise, they're going to take, a supermajority in both houses of the Italian parliament.
Yeah, I mean, Italy has a history in recent years, even in the EU, but I mean, really recent years, we're talking about as not being happy with its relationship to the EU, but still attempted to pursue its own policy, like with Libya and countries like this. So, I mean, you have different possibilities. I think at that time, and they'll open up again in the Italian space. I mean, really, there's a lot of unanswered stuff. It's going to be, I think, difficult for a group like Lega to deal with its continued narrative and the way that maybe Salvini and others had to posture vis-a-vis COVID and things like this. And I think that the thing that's happening when you look at all of the sort of like the analytics on overlap of interests from social media, you're going to find that the people that are most against the lockdown and most against the mandates have the highest overlap with people who are looking sympathetically at the Russian angle in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting demographic and thing. And the Italian Russian Italy is a super high focus of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service and of their foreign ministry.
Yes.
They're constantly up Italy's ass with things. You remember that Russia established the ability to deploy its military within Italy during the COVID crisis, and that there was an Italian government that invited the Russian military onto Italian soil. So there's many fucking weird ass things that are happening.
That's a really good point. What I'm looking at here is it just keeps these things keep reconfirming for me that it isn't U.S. versus Russia. It's not. It's really everyone against Davos, what I call Davos, and like these old European colonialist oligarchs who move people around and they activate various factions within all of our governments. Within the Russia, they used to activate, the financial sector in Russia. They activate the U.S. neocons here, and to go to war. Right? They activate the Biden administration to destroy energy security and food security. They overthrow governments in Europe. Right? What happens when powerful forces say to them, no, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore? When there are groups that are not just as powerful, but when you start to see a confluence of smaller powers, U.S. commercial banks, the Russians, populists in Italy, finally see the light, then all of a sudden they can do significant damage here to this plan. And I think it's just a bad read on everybody's part not to believe that, then the question becomes that this isn't possible. And then all I ever do is just go and look at people's incentives. Like, it's simple. I don't see commercial banks in the United States, some of the most powerful people in the world, wanting to give up that power so that we can all go to central bank digital currencies and create minority report with Germans. It just doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't scan to me. That narrative just doesn't scan. Right.
It doesn't. I mean, you and I would look at through a realist or even Machiavellian lens a lot of the machinations of politics. But the thing is that even though the elites and through actually conspiracy lore, there's a lot of power projected that they have absolute control, that they're totally in control, and that what you're actually observing is an inter-elite conflict occurring.
Yes.
And, that you kind of have to take an interdisciplinary approach.
Yes.
To understand that, because you have to look at areas kind of like of color revolutions, insurgencies. You have to look at the economics, the financial warfare, war as diplomacy. You have to look at all of these.
Agreed.
Right. And it makes it difficult because in sort of academia, things are highly compartmentalized. Right.
Yes.
And interdisciplinarity has been there was an interesting movement towards interdisciplinarity, but then it was kind of replaced by inclusivity. So then it's everything like, compartmentalized through gender lens, right.
We can be interdisciplinary as long as that everybody agrees that trannies are, get to run the world. Like
that's it. So that's what they mean now. So there's a lack of interdisciplinarity, really, right? It's actually dominating by a cult in the humanities. Mm-hmm. So that but when you look at, with the in great power rivalry or any, just sort of elements of game theory, even
right.
When you look at the stakes are too high in power, and elections actually do result in possibilities at different levels. We're not talking about you have an election and then like the Rothschilds are overthrown or something, but you know what I mean? Like there are things that happen that are differences in these elections in these parliamentary democracies, right? Sure. And they signify things at the very least, and they can even co-determine things at the very most. And so you can at least read signals, you know, even if you can't control outcomes, you can, in terms of the elections, but you can always, you know, hedge your bets and control outcomes of your own life, even if you can't control the outcomes of governments, of what governments do.
Agreed.
Right. So that's liberating, you know, at the very least.
Yeah, that's what I think that's, you know, that's kind of I know that's the space that I'm in, like, you know, philosophically, like, so why do I do this? You know, people ask, you know, why do you do this for a living? Well, it's to try and help people make some sense of what's going on so that they can not be overwhelmed, and so they can make good decisions in their own life. And even if all they do is just check in with me once a week, or, you know, every couple of weeks to go, yep, Tom's still telling us that, you know, it's going to suck, but we can get through it. So I'm going to go back to mowing my yard, building a chicken coop, or doing whatever it is I'm going to do, and go to work and just, you know, try and make the best of things. At the very least, I get to sleep better at night knowing that there's a path out of this, possible path out of this. There's no one has a crystal ball here. Right. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. None of us have the cheat codes to the future. The Rothschilds are not all powerful. And the game board's constantly changing, because I've been at the table. I've been at the table where allies stab each other in the back, you know, over.
Thank you for getting us back on track. That's where we were going with this. Right. So everyone can see that the minute that you have people think that there has to be elites in this inter-elite conflict that give a fuck about other people besides themselves. And that's a fundamental error. Right. But that's also good news, because their own, you know, agency and their own desire for whatever they're after. See, the minute that you have a populist kind of, you know, the numbers speak for themselves. They have to latch on to that populist thing and then make good on a quarter of those or half of those platform things, but because the stakes for power are just too high not to. Right. And so you know, that's such an important thing in you know, democratic processes that you have, that is part of the game, you know. Yes, absolutely. It would be in a lot worse situation if it was just IBM and Microsoft saying this is the new legislation. Right.
No, and we don't have that. And I know that they're trying to build that, but it's not working. And it's not working for, you know, again, you and I had that conversation after, you know, we spoke the last time, like, you know, from a law of diminishing marginal utility perspective, I hate to like put Austro-libertarian on. I'll just use the law of diminishing marginal utility. At the end of the day, there's a diminishing return on that kind of behavior over time that eventually undermines it. Like at some point, you just talking about in physical terms, the loss due to friction in order to push the world where it doesn't want to go. As engineers would say, "Hey, you want to do that? That's like pushing a dead whale up the beach. You can push the dead whale up the beach, but eventually you're going to get tired, and the dead whale is going to run you over, and then you're done." Or you roll back down, blubber and all, blubber and all, and then you're going to get run over, and we see that all the time. And so, for example, like I'm not predicting anything here, but I know that, like, I look at everybody's now worried about BlackRock, right? And and I'm like, that's interesting, but you know, BlackRock went all in on Davos, DEI, and ESG, and that's Davos taking control of the U.S. government, right? And they don't have control of the U.S. government. Oh, they have nominal control, but they haven't been able to get any of their legislation passed. Right. They haven't been able to stop the Federal Reserve from aggressively raising interest rates and raising the cost of capital and putting tremendous pressure on their source of power, which is the offshore dollar markets.
See, someone has to be behind that. That doesn't just happen by itself.
Right. It doesn't just happen. So who's behind that? So is there?
That's the $64,000 question.
Oh, I know who's behind that. It's really obvious. It's J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and Wells. And while BOFA, BlackRock, Vanguard, and all that, they're all in with von Schnitzel. Like, that's what they're doing. It's very obvious. You can see it in the headlines every day. You can see when you listen to what Goldman's trying to tell the market, what Morgan's trying to tell the market versus what BOFA is trying to tell the market. You can see it. Like, it's so clear. And obviously, all the financial media is in the tank for these guys, for the bad guys, while the other ones are going, look, we're not giving up Wall Street. The Hamptons still matter. Get over yourselves. we still have power and we're going to use it. We have the Federal Reserve and we have mechanisms in place now that we can separate the damage that you can do when we destroy your banks. That we in many ways, and this is one of the things that people don't understand, is like the U.S. commercial banking system and the Fed have created mechanisms to decouple and split the U.S. banking system off from Europe. So Europe can implode and it won't blow back completely on the American system, the American banking system.
That's funny because a lot of the problems in Europe occur after the firewall goes down. Like Europeans actually, through reasons that can only explain, nefariously, took down their firewall and allowed all that stuff that allowed the 2007, 2008 stuff to pop. I mean, they stopped vetting these. They stopped vetting the products being sold to them and how they were packaged.
Yep.
So when they bought all that, they pass it off to the Greeks and called it the Greek crisis.
The
thanks, I didn't know that was a Greek crisis. I mean, it's maybe Greek in a particular way, but not in that way. You know what I mean? But
it's great to bring that up. I've kind of forgotten about that, having just trying to parse the last 4 or 5 years of history. But yeah, thinking about the American housing crisis and the imbalances that we then got sold to CDOs and whatnot to Europe, who then and then that created the Greek financial crisis, which
that's right.
And now those same banks are putting up putting the firewall back up, and allow Europe to get
your problem. Yeah,
it's your problem now. And
they put him into the tank, close the door, shake.
Yeah, because Klaus Schwab made the mistake of thinking that he could take out Wall Street.
Well, think about how Schwab did, how they got. I mean, the Schwabians, how they were able to corner Germany into not having an energy policy. They did the Goldilocks and the Three Bears on energy sources. It was kind of like, oh, wood, that's too hot. Coal, that's too cold. This one, not. It's like, well, there's gonna be these. Like, well, what about the ones that haven't been invented yet? Well, good fucking luck. Like with that today, right? I mean, what about the ones that haven't been invented yet?
Yeah. Germany wants to lead a hydrogen economy going forward, and there's no infrastructure for the hydrogen economy. You guys have to put gas on you have to put you have to keep BASF running in order to actually be able to do that. And Alexander Mercouris brings this point up all the time, which is that the Germans have lived off of the internal mercantilism of the euro and the eurozone. That while their nominal GDP growth has been great and their standard of living is great, but it's created just massive stagnation. That there's no innovation happening within the German economy. That really all they're doing is producing the same stuff slightly better than they were 30 years ago. But BMW, basically BMWs and Siemens, what they produce. But the Siemens isn't a leader in chip or any of this stuff anymore.
They have, Tom. It's such a problem because the way that the European Union is designed is that the ability for countries to emit from their banks to emit the currency is not correctly tied or realistically tied to their potential or their real existing output. So they're trying to control different disequilibriums in national economic development from occurring in Europe to prevent the types of civil wars that Europe has seen before. But in so doing, they've only inserted a certain outcome to the kinds of things that war demands. That's the problem, right? So, and they're going to, people, you have a lot of European listeners too, and they'll appreciate, they'll remember they woke up one day when the euro was rolled out, and if they lived in, Spain, Portugal, Italy, or Greece, or, they woke up and their money, the prices doubled overnight. Their money was worth half as much. Right. And, that's like, and people want it, and then you get these kids, they're taking out of Poland or something and giving them university tuitions to write about how opposition to the euro is rooted in anti-Semitism or rooted in homophobia or something. And no, it's rooted in people lost half their money overnight. And that's not a conspiracy theory. It's not the reptiles or the Hebrews or it's not, so I just, what you're doing is fantastic. to empower people this way and to inform them, looking at September and looking at mid-September and late September, what you're going to have is you may have an outcome already ready to go for Kharkov, city of Kharkov. You will have this insurrection type of simulation maybe underway in Odessa or for Odessa out of Mykolaiv. I know that they've recruited forces out of Mykolaiv region and Odessa, Mykolaiv region and Odessa region into the core of a force that I don't know if they're going to try to do, landing or link with Transnistria or what. But what you can see is that, and people will appreciate that, Shoigu announced just 14 or 15 days ago, significant escalation in the overall Russian approach. Prior to that, a week before that, a very strange thing. Putin was responding to something in media, and he said that really the West hadn't seen anything in terms of the Russian force plan in Ukraine. So they've actually said, and then in what also to bear in mind is that for Kharkov region, they've already in the official media, which is a very important, right? They're kind of their state access media like TASS and these, right, were covered that in the parts of Kherson that are controlled by Russia, that the local administrations were raising flags of the type that a Russian state would have in the region. And this is in contravention to the Geneva Code. Typically speaking, Russia's argument is that it's by proxy through the locals. You see, but the point is that TASS covered this as an event, not as a stunt.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like, now here's the flag of this region of Kherson, the administrative region. And it's one of these tricolors that you're seeing roll out just in the same standard with the double eagle and the 3 different colors. And, all these regions, former Ukraine, have their own unique one. And while there's fan fiction and there's movements that have those flags for some time, the fact that this was covered in media and that it was rolled out as an event, like the administration has put the flag of the new flag of this administrative blah blah blah, that very Russian official way they do their repetitive news. They
right. No, it's good.
That's a very clear signal about what Kherson will be.
Yes.
Sorry. What Kharkiv will be. I'm talking about Kharkiv. Forgive me. In the Kharkiv region. So they're showing that in Kharkiv, they're going to do the same thing that we saw in Kherson. Yes. And they're going to have this, and they're doing that already. So this is not a positions that they're holding temporarily as part of a peace agreement where they withdraw. Every region that they start in, they're going to finish too.
Yes.
So that they're not changing the borders of the regions. That's another thing that,
Yeah, no, I know. So, what I'm thinking is, I mean, no, thank you. That's all really good because it was leading to the thing that I wanted to cover on this, which another point of late September. It's 2 things that are happening relative to the Russians in late September. One, they're returning to the bond market, the sovereign bond market, the international bond markets. That's a big deal relative to all the financial warfare in order to create a more homogeneous trade network across all of Central Asia. The second thing is that they've made noise about holding referenda in all of the quote unquote conquered regions as to whether or not they want to join the Russian Federation or not. So when we know that for Kherson and we know that for Zaporizhia. So
already, and now we see they're going to do that in Kharkov.
Exactly.
Right. And if once the defenses at Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are overcome, and once the Russians occupy and have that and now control that, this is the thing that sets off a lot of deflation of what is it called, Ukraine fatigue syndrome or whatever, like this is like happening. And so once this happens, so now what they're trying to do, what the Ukrainians are trying to do through the information sphere, is to simulate that they have this big offensive that they're trying to launch any minute. But it's actually been a weird kind of news cycle thing that's been in the sort of holographic refractory echo chamber for the past month, and kind of people read it, the story gets revived the next week, someone finds it from last week, they start reporting on it, it kind of falls asleep, someone from the next week finds it again, and it's been going on for about 40 days, that there's supposed to be this big Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kherson region. And that has not only failed to materialize, but it's created a whole internal, comedic industry inside of Ukraine. Their own populations are kind of laughing now at these declared, it's the cynicism has long set in. Everyone's lost loved ones. They're not happy with, however they feel about the outcome. Maybe they want Ukraine to regain its territories, but they're done with the conflict. And nobody wants the war to continue except for crazy people or people without children or lunatics or something like that. So
American neocons.
Yeah, that's it. Lavrov has said, that it's ridiculous everyone knows which way the wind is blowing on this. And I'm not saying that people, look, there's a case to be made, a very strong one, for Ukrainians to defend their country down to the last man, if that's the fight that they're having. The problem is that Ukrainians just don't see Russians as being that foreign to be to them, and that different. And considering they have all the same TV channels, and they have the same movie stars, and they speak the same language, and it just kind of like, is this tax farmer over here or that tax farmer over there? It's not worth dying at that level. Is your life worth actually, you have the inflation of the Ukrainian currency versus the ruble, or you have the stability of a country trying to integrate into the fucking, excuse my French, European Union, for God's sake, against Russia that's pinned its currency to hard assets and natural resources, put a gold floor and things like this. So it's kind of like, what's the people even who in Ukraine, who obviously is many people who are at your level of discourse and follow these things and look at their life, and they don't look at perhaps like through the lens of Ukrainian nationalism or Russian nationalism or whatever, but they're just looking privately at what the future, what the school systems might be like, or what they can get out of, and what taxes are going to be like. And you're looking at just 18% flat rate in Russia, and a stable currency that's tied to, you covered it in more detail. So, but they have a stable currency nevertheless. And then they're also, think about the fact that they don't have any investment into Ukraine has been drying up since 2014, because every article about investment, Forbes talks about the corruption, about the problem. There's a rule of law problem.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to be making a case for more government or better government in a place, but actually you're not. This is just like a hard issue of, do you have stop signs, and do you have this is a stop signs issue, and this is a basic infrastructure issue. So in the commons, or I know there's a lot of thinking out there about that, but I support the commons, and I would say that you need that. And so tragedies of the commons notwithstanding, but you have this need for that, like you have needs for many other things in life that mitigate greater problems. And one of those problems is the decline of rule of law in Ukraine. Most of the flight out of Ukraine from people, as soon as it was announced, is not because they thought they lived in a war zone that Russia was involved in. If you look at where people were leaving from Ukraine, they were leaving from places that have been economically depressed for almost the last decade. Right. And when you look at like the IMF profile for Ukraine, they might say things like, oh, the average, or the median monthly salary is 700 euros. So you would say the annual would be about 8,400 euros or something like that. and that's ridiculously low. But it's equivalent maybe to about Poland or something like this. It's close. Serbia might be below that even.
Right.
But when you look at actually the quality of life in Ukraine, you realize that something is up with these numbers. I mean, I don't know if they conflated average, including oligarchs, when they came up with their median number. But there's no way that 700 euros a month is the most occurring salary, because from 2016 to 2019. Like the overall real GDP and the kind of, when you look at actual physical economy, not these other things, was real comparable to sub-Saharan Africa. And in terms of their actual PPP, purchasing power parity and buying power and stuff like this. So, I mean, the catastrophe of the failed state, and actually, I would say Patrick Henningsen has talked at length about this as well. The Ukrainian failed state. All things point towards a need to bring Europe and the U.S. really, to the negotiating table about the Europe crisis before winter sets in. Let's start bargain now based upon the facts on the ground. That means that you need to have a lot of operations in their final modes by the middle of November, but you need before the first snow probably.
Yep. No, that's a great way of encapsulating all that. And just to remind people, a point that I make all the time, the purchasing power parity of the median income in Russia from the IMF is equivalent to Germany's. So the difference is so stark between Ukraine and Russia that as the Russians move in infrastructure to rebuild the stop signs and rebuild, the things, and not have killed off the civilian infrastructure, well, for the most part. Obviously, someone can tell me, "Oh, well, they bombed this building over there." Yes, they did, but did they bomb the water plant? Did they bomb this? Did they bomb the water treatment facility? Did they bomb the power stations? Did they do anything? No, they did not. Right? Of course not. Are they rebuilding? Mariupol? Yes, they are. Like, there's, the world is normalcy is coming back, and since the Russian economy is not a hyper financialized economy, it produces more goods than services.
Right.
Power parity argument for the Russians.
Do you make that a ratio? Do you have that as a formula in terms of within that the ratio of goods to services? I
haven't done the hard work on that. I personally the hard statistical work, but we just know. Yeah.
But in terms of as a general matrix, like, this is a useful construct for people to understand.
It's just to think of it that the United States, for example, we produce a lot of stuff, but a lot of our GDP is making money on money, and most of the UK, for example, is GDP is making money on money and financial services. And without City of London financial services, the UK GDP is pretty small, and they're willingly torching a lot of really important business, like, shipping insurance and things that Lloyd's of London and have been. That's what they make their money on. They don't make their money on, insuring Britney Spears' tits. Like, they make their money insuring oil tankers going around the world.
Okay? Right.
Same thing with Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce does not make money selling Phantoms to Arab sheiks. They make money selling propellers for ships that go around the world and move oil on VLCCs and Suezmax oil carriers. That's where Rolls-Royce makes their money. Okay. I did work with a coatings company that we had a contract with. We were doing development work with the Rolls-Royce on exactly this stuff, on impellers and things along those lines.
Yeah, they make engines on jets and stuff.
Jet engines, all that kind of stuff. It's very, very important. So, like, the Russian economy, you can say it's, not particularly sophisticated, and okay, it's not. They don't even have, 90 nanometer chip capability in their chip industry, but they know how to make concrete, and they know how to make, they know how to make energy, and they know how to build roads, and they know how to put up streetlights, and they know how to, build power plants, and they know how to do these things that are going to be necessary to this. This is the winning hearts and minds. In, like, I don't foresee in any way, manner, shape, or form any trouble with a referenda going off to the West's extreme dislike in Zaporizhia and Kherson,
right?
Or eventually Kharkov or Nikolaev or Odessa. Like, these things are going to happen. It's just a matter. And this is why Kissinger was at Davos saying, "Sue for peace now before you lose more territory."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he sees which way it's going. It's crazy, the perpetual motion machine, like that they have over there with the Davos boys, and how they, propose a solution for Ukraine is basically more war.
Right.
And I think when you look at the aftermath of where the Russian thing has gone, when you look at Mariupol and the reconstruction, and they're going to be handing like new apartment buildings back to people who lost their apartment buildings within a few months already. So I don't know, the very fast speed, the period, like a lot of the sanctions and the attempts to crash the ruble actually go back in recent history, like we talked about before, 7 years ago, and they did a lot of import substitution, industrialization, and so they took advantage of that period of a weak ruble, and even though it made some certain necessary imports more expensive, it actually inspired angles of the domestic economy that were not the path of least resistance when the ruble was stronger.
Right.
So when the ruble becomes weaker, then you actually get a return to kind of smaller businesses and upstart enterprises that perform those things that previously were done abroad.
I would say.
And so this whole process, this whole ISI process. I mean, Latin America did this with some success during the Great Depression in the 1930s. So there's a precedence for this.
Mm-hmm.
And but doing ISI in Russia under that imposed ruble paradigm was an amazing turnaround, and actually prepared them for the present moment.
Agreed.
And you know what I mean? So people
I could see it coming. I saw it coming 8 years ago when it started to happen. I'm like, I can see exactly what Putin's trying to do here. When he put forward, I wrote about this. When I worked for Newsmax at the time, so everything I wrote about all this was behind the paywall. But during my coverage, when I was going through the 2014, 2015 ruble crisis, it was very clear to me that it was Putin's economic package, the liberalization package, which he put forth, and everybody in Russia was surprised by. Because it was we're going to free float the ruble, we're going to divert money away from oil and gas, state money away from oil and gas. We're going to now work on food. We're going to now work on food and import substitution in these markets. The West, of course, likes to point out, well, you were miserable and getting chips done. Like, well, yeah, but dude, whatever. Like, we're not building chips. We're building a domestic, we're building a domestic food production and timber production, and we're building roads and things that we didn't have before. We're still building all of this stuff, and we also know that we're going to be having that every day that we do this way, we're going to have to fight an actual, honest to God, kinetic war against the West at some point in the future. And therefore, these things, weren't building chips. We were building tanks. We were fighter jets. We were
preparing this way.
We were building missile systems and, figuring out ways to sell that technology to the world and do the thing. And, two can play that game. Like, that's just the way this stuff works. So, it's not a bastion of free market capitalism or anything along those lines. I'm not, we're not sitting here going to grind our ideological axes. This is about real, honest to God, pragmatic, everyday freaking, oh God, what do we need to freaking deal with? Because order of operations in this sense matters. There may be a necessary retrenching and pulling back of market liberalizations in the short term, or in this case, maybe for a generation, which is necessary to be able to create the infrastructure necessary to then allow the
vulnerability
liberalization
absolutely.
later after the enemies have all been conquered. I mean, this is the way you have
right. It's 1,000%. I mean, you're talking about civilization and history, you know, and so that's the dimensions of the scale and the questions, in play. And I think that when you look at the way that, first of all, the internationalized system of production, globalization, wasn't conducted under conditions of laissez-faire itself. So these all had these real relationships tied in a certain way, which cannot go further. So this is not a question of, interventionism versus markets in terms of the supply chain issues of globalization and with the return to national autarky in some instances where necessary. So I don't think so. I think if people are operating from the idea that the present globalized, and I think few people are. They just might think that they might forget that that's the case, because the way it gets presented sometimes, Tom, is like as if we're moving against markets and we're moving against free trade by addressing issues of supply line security, supply line stability, energy versus, outsourcing versus nationalization versus automation.
Right.
So what's interesting is that militaries have orders that are connected to constitutions, and the legality of those are often determined by judges. And the courts and constitutions and military systems is its own animal, which interacts with the world. It gives shape to the world through the manner that it operates. Mm-hmm. It's not that people have statist ideas that give shape to states acting like states, mm-hmm. but they actually have their own consciousness from in a simulate, or you can say it like a simulated consciousness, mm-hmm. or the way that we interact with it at its level of complexity, we may as well treat it like a consciousness, sure. because all the different feedback points that it's interacting with, as if it's alive. You're right. Sure. So so it takes a life of its own, and militaries and states and court systems just kind of have their own metabolic system, and they are inherently at odds with this other species that they kind of have a histamine reaction to, which are all this like fluidity in global markets and right. changes that occur to constitutions and social order that threaten military or threaten courts or threaten judicial systems. Right. Judges like to put people in jail. Militaries like things to be military law. You know right. what I'm saying? So if they don't have that, and they know that they don't exert power outside of their turf,
right?
So they have to preserve that. And then so that creates this strange avenue of popular resistance against global predations through this other local mafia that people mm-hmm. have decisions to make, So that's how I see people situated. Like if you're in Nicaragua mm-hmm. or Kazakhstan, if someone comes in and says, "Oh, liberalize all these markets," that it just means, "Oh, they're already liberalized." But if they were further liberalized, that actually that these are just desovereignization of
yes.
So that's the point to draw from that.
And this is the hard part. This is a very nuanced problem that a lot of people on my side of the ledger, the philosophical ledger, don't want to engage in, because they just want to go, look, it's better that we liberalize everything. Yeah, but no. Everything exists within the context of the other people. We can move there philosophically. Personally, we can get there, and if we do that, then we will affect the zeitgeist in the long run. We will move humanity in that position, in that direction, if right. we're over the long haul. But there's an order of operations of dealing with breaking down the existing systems, and a lot of frankly, a lot of libertarians forget the libertarian Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm while you're under, there's a certain amount of societal harm you're not supposed to do. And a lot of, frankly, a lot of left-leaning libertarians don't give a fuck about that, because, well, guess what? They're fucking leftists, and they like breaking things. And mm-hmm. they have the same kind of Leninist revolutionary spirit. Okay. Mm-hmm. within their version of this, and it's honestly it's just very much left brain possession and idea and they're just dealing with that part of what happens to humans when they get ideologically possessed, as opposed to backing out and going, okay, well, we know where we want to go. How do we get there? Well, we can undo this, and we can undo this thing over here. But in order to undo that, we have to undo this, and then right. the other thing over here, and then we got to get rid of the bank. So, that's an order of operations that you're talking about. And that's that order of operations I keep talking about. And so, for me, how do you deal with Davos? You deal with Davos, who right now are the proximate problem in the world, as we all wind up under a technocratic, tyrannical thing that I like to describe, as I said earlier, as like Minority Report, but with more Germans. How do you get rid of those people? Well, you have to take out their source of their power. And what's the source of their power? It's the offshore dollar markets, where they can create credit dollars in order to buy governments, buy militaries, by politicians, and disrupt capital markets and disrupt pricing signals throughout those markets. So here's the interesting part about it. So who would stand to thwart that? Well, anybody who doesn't want that to occur. Well, what's their end goal? Their end goal is to turn it all into a central bank run system. Well, then obviously the commercial banks, especially the American commercial banks, would not want this to happen. But whereas the source of a lot of the Eurodollar power comes from European banks and from Hong Kong banks and from City of London banks. Well, then how do you destroy them? Well, you destroy the offshore dollar market by drying up the amount of dollars necessary at a particularly fragile moment in time. And you start destroying the Eurodollar system. How do you do that? Well, when
you say the euro dollar system, do you mean the euro dollar at the core of the euro, or the euro dollar, or
sorry, I'm a little inside baseball on my part. So let's
because people use that one word differently in different areas.
The offshore dollar markets are called the euro dollar markets because they began in Europe, right? So when you hear people use the word euro dollar, it has nothing to do with the euro currency. It's just dollars that sit in European banks or City of London banks or Singaporean banks or Hong Kong banks that are then used as the basis to create a fractional reserve loan, which then that bank. So the argument about the quote unquote Eurodollar or shadow banking system, they're kind of the same thing, meaning that they have the ability to create more credit dollars than the Federal Reserve does. Right. This is the argument that Jeff Snyder, formerly of Alhambra Partners, has been making for years. And he's absolutely right about this, I believe. But the problem has always been, how do you decouple, and so the US banks were all part of the same system ultimately, because everything was tied to LIBOR and, the credit markets were all kind of indexed to the same interest rates. They're not anymore. So how do you break that? Well, how do you break the Eurodollar markets? Well, in Europe, this is an interesting thing between the composition of debt in Europe versus the United States. And the United States is mostly corporate debt. Companies just issue their own private paper. In Europe, companies expand by buying bank debt. So if the company gets in trouble, they default on a bank loan, and then the bank's balance sheet degrades directly, and it's a direct destruction of the bank. Whereas in the United States, if the company gets in trouble, well, they got to restructure their debt in some way. They may wind up getting taken over by the bank. They may have to go to but they have to go to their shareholders and restructure the debt or do something, right? We get more M&A activity, because of this stuff, yada, yada, yada. Corporate raiders, the Bain Capital types. So these are two different worlds. But what it does mean is that when European banks get in trouble, they get in trouble quick during an economic downturn. Whereas in America, we start to see hiccups in both the high yield debt markets and the investment grade debt markets of commercial paper markets, as opposed to necessarily the U.S. Treasury market, and then by extension, the bank debt. So where 2008 was about bank debt in the United States, because it was about creating a mortgage bubble, right, which was a direct bank debt thing. This time, corporate bank, we can have a slowdown and corporate balance sheets will degrade, but they'll still pay their corporate debt coupons because they all issued all this corporate debt at unbelievably low interest rates, or they'll swap it out for equity or whatever. It's not going to be a banking problem per se, but it is going to be a banking problem in Europe, and therefore the Fed can jack the fuck out of interest rates and put pressure on Europe, and it won't blow back as hard on the United States, and because the Fed can then also issue all the credit money, all the elastic money they need to keep all the banks liquid. Whereas the ECB cannot, because of the way it's constituted. The ECB can go bankrupt, but the Fed can't. The Fed can hyperinflate its currency, but the ECB can go bankrupt. Like the ECB's balance sheet can go negative because they hold on their balance sheet.
Europe isn't.
So it's these break points that matter when trying to understand what's going to happen here.
Yes.
So,
because Europe, the crisis that Europe is in is that it is now being forced by Russia and by the US, strangely at the same time,
yes,
to ask itself a question, really before it's too late, because this shit could have gone on for some fucking time, like with this kind of, we don't have an energy source, and well, we're gonna get solar to work, but it doesn't work, and now we're right. This game. Now the question is this is like a referendum on these resetists in Europe. The U.S. can flip back to a lot of resources and do a lot of things that Europe isn't set up to do.
We can just pull back and not be an empire.
Europe has to be part of Eurasia, or it has to be a propped up transatlantic, zone.
Well,
economic zone.
And it's not going to be under the rubric. It can't, all of its dynamism is gone under the rubric of the EU. Any potential dynamism of the collapse in the euro, right? A devaluation of the euro versus global currencies, which should invite some capital flow into the inflow. They're not getting it. What they're going to get is extreme capital flight out, and they're looking.
That's right.
They're looking to default on all this debt that they don't want to pay and do the George Soros thing.
They need to. They need to, and they have. But they have. I mean, they had the story, but they had a geographically limited story, because a lot of the confidence in the euro was based upon this growth of the European Union, and that there's going to be a new member state, and there's going to be a new member state. And that kind of carried us through from like this 2004, 2005 story all the way through 2000, whatever the last member joined, 2017 or whatever.
Right.
But that's like these little I don't know, whatever. I don't know if that was Montenegro or I don't know. Whatever, some bullshit. That's NATO, whatever. It's done. It's done. Right. So there's no more. I mean, they talked about, Turkey, they've talked about Georgia, they've talked about Ukraine, but they're all in this similar category. And Azerbaijan, never going to happen.
Never.
And it's just never going to happen. Merkel said as much. They've all said as much. But the story for a lot of there was supposed to be so much more money made out of sort of the retrofitting or cannibalization of the kind of the Soviet-esque model in the Romanian physical economy and their farming industry and their light machinery industry, Romania, Bulgaria. These were all kind of oversold to people, who have euros and and to believe in this kind of European Union dream and financially speaking, was on this growth. So then they hit this. There, you have a hard limit. I mean, Israel talked for a time about joining the EU. There's been, it's kind of like every country that's actually been in Eurovision has at one time, there's been the Eurovision contest has at one time in history, like had a government official say, maybe we'll join the EU, like a president or prime minister has floated it in the last 10 years. So they need that. So how would you explain that in terms of how do you financialize the concept that you're going to acquire new territories? Very obvious, because you're saying there's new businesses, new things that we're going to be selling off, privatizing, commercializing. There's going to be all these new services necessary to be attached to the way that we're redoing the physical economy.
Well, what the EU is their biggest export in their mind at this point is the regulatory state. They want to normalize their regulatory state to the
That's what
world.
they do,
and that's why they want more territory. That's why they want more countries, because the more countries under the EU rubric, the more countries that are in their regulatory state, and then everything gets normalized. All the tax rates get normalized, all the quality standards, and that means that all the power of that regulatory state and that bureaucratic state rolls up to Brussels.
Yeah,
that's what they want, and they think that's the path to power for the EU is to create a perfect bureaucratic regulatory state.
Well, that's like the Borg consciousness of these entities. I mean, they're kind of eminentizing consciousnesses that kind of emerge from these storms,
And so, when you look at that's what they want to do, and then everybody else is going, yeah, that's nice. We're not doing that. And I've always said that the EU is that the EU is built along the same model as California. Every bad idea in the United States starts in California and drifts east because it's the most powerful economy within the 50 states, or at least used to be. But it still is, but it's not going to be soon. The same thing happens as if you can get the Germans to say we're going to go green, then all of the EU has to go green. And then by extension, if the EU says we have to go green, then the world has to go green. Well, That's why
No.
Italy. That's why, yeah, and Russia and China stood up and went, no.
Yeah.
And
No.
that was the end of that. And the most of the global South went, yeah, that's a dodge. We're not doing that.
Right.
And we don't look. We
Hard
just
pass.
spent the 20th century getting out from underneath the freaking colonialist assholes.
Right.
How about no?
Right.
Like,
It's a crazy new religion. You just have to it's a new tithing. The carbon credit, just a tithing system to a religion called global warming.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, there's so many angles on the way you can view this, but it's so, there's so many ways, and everybody to a man are all going, yeah, fuck off. Like it's so very obvious. And it's even, and the way they kept trying to make this work was by continually grinding the United States competitiveness down.
mm-hmm.
So the goal here has always been to grind the United States and make it less and less competitive, to bring it in line with Europe, sclerotic Europe. And therefore, capital doesn't fly out of Europe, because the United States is constantly under this political, social, cultural miasma and economic miasma of everything that happens in Europe. And that's why the Eurodollar system, that's why America never developed its own interest rate index for its debt under the Obama administration, even though after 2008, everybody in the American banking system said we need our own, after the LIBOR scandal.
Yes.
We need our own interest rate index. And that idea, SOFR, the Secured Overnight Funding Rate, started ages ago. But Obama, for the 8 years of the Obama administration, said no to it. It was only when Trump got in power, Powell and became Fed chair, and John Williams became head of the Atlanta Fed, that SOFR went into practice, and then was slowly rolled out over 4 years. And now today, SOFR is the law of the land. All the debt in the United States is indexed to SOFR, which therefore is effectively indexed to the Fed funds rate. And LIBOR has been decoupled. And that was always the transmission mechanism for European bank stress. Becomes your credit card debt now. So if Unicredit got in trouble, or Deutsche Bank got in trouble, and LIBOR blew out, that meant my credit card was no longer 9.9%, and it went to 13%. Or my HELOC went from an adjustable rate of 3% to 7%. And I had to deal with it, even though my bank wasn't in trouble, even though my bank didn't need to do that. But because everything was indexed to LIBOR, it was just in the contract. And so it created it. So the slowdown in Europe created the slowdown in the United States, which then would eventually force the Fed's hand to then have to stop raising interest rates, go back to zero, go back to QE. And that's been the history for, a long, long time. And that is no longer the case. And this is what I keep saying over and over again. It's like it would be easy to go back to 2017 and just go, oh yeah, but it's always worked this way. And every time the Fed has ever tried to raise interest rates, or 2018, they've had they've had to reverse themselves in the past, and they may have to in the future. I'm not saying that they're going to raise interest rates to the moon and not cut at some point. What I'm saying is they have far more room to rise than anybody wants to admit. In January, nobody in alternative financial space, or even in normie financial space, said the Fed can raise maybe to 1%, and that would be that. And then they'll have to reverse course because there will be a financial crisis and everything will collapse. I'm like, okay, we're 2.25% and nothing has collapsed. You're wrong. Maybe you should check your premises. Oh, no. The Fed's going to pivot tomorrow. Okay. Well, when the Fed's at 7% and they haven't pivoted, you're going to tell me that next week it's going to be that's going to be the day because you need to save face on Twitter, you fucking asshole. No. Like, this is where we are. Like, you can be right eventually, but who cares if you're right eventually? You have to be right now.
There's like a broken clock. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the broken clock fallacy. And so when I look at all of this, I say to myself, come right back to what I asked you at the beginning of this podcast is all of this coming to a head in September? Because all of these narratives that have been spun about the way the world actually works, Ukraine is winning, they're going to counteroffensive, they bled the Russians white, Europe is inevitable, blah, 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 all of this stuff. The Democrats are going to win the midterms.
Yeah, you have midterm elections. You have midterm elections in the states.
Yep.
And is this not a fucking referendum? On whether $9 a gallon gas is worth losing a war in Ukraine?
Yeah, well,
right?
Biden's got it down, but they've gotten it back down to just under $4 a gallon here, and now that's what the Biden administration is actually running on, the idea that, well, we saved you from $6 a gallon gasoline
that we imposed.
But we got it,
yeah.
We've got it historically back down as quickly as we have. Like, no, the summer driving season is over, and you lifted the you lifted some of the blending credit rules, and the refinery maintenance is over, and you knew this shit was going to happen because you told all the refiners to go into maintenance mode in the middle of the summer.
Okay, so they
it was all bullshit. Like we never had to go to $5 a gallon gasoline. They did it on purpose because it's a typical Straussian two-step these motherfuckers do. So they take gas from $1.85 a gallon to $5 a gallon,
right?
And then tell you that, and then get used to $5, so that when they bring it back down to $3.50, you go, well, okay, I guess things aren't so bad. Bullshit. Yeah. $3.50 is still unacceptable. $12 a pound meat is unacceptable.
That's right. Period.
Yeah.
Full stop. Yeah. Yeah. So when you look at what Russia, so first of all, they need to be irreversibly in the process of having almost taken a lot of things that have to be done before the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So also, there's going to be huge movement in social media in the direction of further censorship.
Yes.
So they're going to try to say, of course, the Russia, and you have this election coming up in the U.S. that's a referendum on Russia. So come on, guys, right? So now you're going to have whatever crisis in the U.S. around the election, the censorship, the narrative, and it being a referendum on outcome. So that means that they're going to have to, that there's going to be Russia having to show facts on the ground going into November about what the real situation is. And it's going to be hard to say that the U.S. is backing a side in this fight and that they're just, maybe there's going to be some, magical, counterattack, counteroffensive in Kherson. We're going to now be in September, October, November, and there's going to be, Russia in Dnipropetrovsk, in Sumy, in Kharkov. In Kharkov, having all of Kharkov. They're going to resolve the city. They're going to resolve the ownership of the city. They're going to move into Mykolaiv. They're going to have things happening with Odessa. Mm-hmm. I'm suggesting a further simulation of a civilian uprising.
Sure.
There's many components to this, but there are some things that are very important markers. The American election. Also, if I recall correctly, the Russians are due to complete a report to the UN on their latest on the biological labs and evidences on that relate the Bidens to their main clients being the Democratic Party and the Department of Defense and some other very strange, like usual suspects type of names that were the customers of the data from the biological weapons or with the biological weapons maintenance or the biological weapons safety, whatever you want to call these biological weapons labs. They were weaponized biological agents, so I don't know what that's called, but at a lab. So this had come out that and the Russian ministry, the Russian foreign ministry released whatever their propaganda on it. And so the question is, to what degree is this? We're not here to argue whether the information is entirely true or to what extent they're pushing it. We're talking about the impact on markets, the impact on voter psychology, the impact on that this is going to have as it ripples through the information sphere in October and September. I think they're going to release it's going to go through its media cycle for up until the election.
Sure.
They're going to add a lot of fuel to the fire with the Biden's corruption. It's going to keep Burisma alive. It's going to keep, Biden Gate alive.
I think they're getting, I'll be honest with you, Joaquin. I think they're getting ready to dump Biden either before the election or after the election between now
You've talked about that before.
and the new Congress being sat, if the new Congress is even sat. This is going to get so ugly here in the U.S. Like, I fully expect the number of lawsuits over election results to be off so high that we're not even able to seat the new Congress by January, unless I'm wrong, unless obviously, and if it does go off like smoothly, if we get a reasonably smooth election and we get a reasonably smooth, I mean by reasonably, like only 20 seats are under lawsuit as opposed to 120 seats. Okay, we get a reasonably smooth election and on all of that, and then by January, these people are sat and we have a new Congress, right? That would actually, in my mind, be a marker that the sovereigntists, for lack of a better term, within the U.S. power structure are winning. Even though there's a lot of work to still be done, there's a lot of bureaucracy that needs to be, dealt with. There's a lot of problems. The Democrats will still control the White House, yada, yada, yada. But it's a marker that we've reached an inflection point of how bad things are going to get in the United States, and they can only, in effect, get better from here. Like we've reached our nadir of political unrest,
right?
And then from there, it's still going to suck. Still, it's not going to. United States is not going to, turn into a, freaking, Disneyland. By in 2024, it's going to be a miserable fucking slog to get out of this. That's going to take us easily through 2032. But at the very least, if this is the nadir, this election cycle right here, this moment, maybe the nadir of what we're seeing in the degradation of U.S. political and cultural and economic, all of these, the Davos's influence gets broken here, and then we can start unwinding the. Yeah, I mean,
being at the point at which it no longer
is getting worse,
gets worse. Yeah, being at the point at which it no longer gets worse is possible, and you would just have to look at what they've been able to do with the Green New Deal, what was promised and what was. You have to go back. Yeah, I know. See, all these things are connected, and obviously the Russia hoax and everything back in the day with the election is obviously you can see how important this Russia thing is. Hillary Clinton was definitely, I mean, in my field and my colleagues, the consensus is that they were going to try to push an increased military confrontation over Crimea being part of Ukraine back in 2014-15. They were going to they wanted to overthrow Erdogan to make sure that they had control of the strait and everything like this. So Clinton was on the path for war, and a lot of people really believe that this would be World War III in that nuclear sense that people think of.
I agreed.
Yeah,
agreed. I remember. I remember it was during that period, during 2014, 2015, 2016, when I was really polishing my geopolitical, the bona fides or whatever you want to call it. That's when I was really studying this stuff intently to get up to speed on the things that I did not know. I understood the markets. Now I needed to put all this stuff together. And believe me, I was reading Fort Russ literally every freaking day. So because I was trying to get up to speed on all of these little things. And so now I look at it in hindsight now, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's clearly obvious. At the time, I didn't quite process it that way, but now that you bring it up, it's clearly obvious that there was a multi-pronged attack to try and convert the entire Black Sea, and that's why the failure in Crimea is such a sticking point for these people, because they understand that without Crimea they don't have anything. And then
they were even going to transfer Snake Island to Romania to have it be a NATO, that little stupid Snake Island thing that kind of came up. I mean, there's a lot of things they were talking about in the last 10 years, and Moldova and Romania unification under a NATO thing. And the sad thing is that there's very good justification for Romania to unite with Moldova. Very, very good justification. Right. There's a very strong case to be made for the Kurds as well. I mean, to have a state. I mean,
agreed.
Yeah, these are all things
that was designed to make sure that the Kurds were split between four different countries. Right.
Order of operations.
Exactly.
Is the issue here.
Yes. So agreed. So the maps should be redrawn. This is another argument about why the about why the global South, for lack of a better term, has resisted this new push towards this new version of now digital colonialism. Is because they see it exactly for what it is. It's just another shitty attempt by the British to continue to, make themselves relevant into the 21st century. When no. And the same thing with, and then, the British and the Germans and, all the Northern European, colonial powers. Like, it's very obvious that that's what they're doing. And these people are, rightly so, they're sick of it. And, we Americans don't have that kind of sense of history, but we also understand that, kind of inherently, that the British have been trying to get their colonies back since the day after Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown, right? Like, it's not hard. Like, when you stop to think about it. So when you look at things like LIBOR, you see that was always another shitty way for the British to have control over various aspects of our, of our banking system. World War II and World War I, both times, your old European money flew into the United States as a safe haven while Europe was atomized with horrific war, which they paid for with their money and through U.S. banks. And now this time they're not able to do it this time. And now the American banks are like, we're not doing this. And I really do see that. So
it's a crazy situation, Tom. I mean, the plan to destroy Europe has been a very real one. And just like gaslighting in an abusive relationship, I say they are accusing Russia as if Russia has some material interest in destabilizing Europe. The 4 times that Europe completely destabilized since 1790.
Right.
Russia was on the receiving end of the cleanup, the mess, the everything.
Yeah.
So this is like they get what happens when Europe destabilizes. Russia's policy has been that, of course, they play games with supporting some countries having their Euroscepticism movements. Of course, they try to intervene in parliamentary gimmicks and games and stuff, but that's a hedge, and those are also investments into leverage. Yep. So that's not the same thing as genuinely wanting to see the thing collapse.
Right.
That's like, now do things pop under the pressure of different people trying to bend it? Well, fucking yeah. And that's sort of what's been happening.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely.
And that would be a good way to describe the sort of Europe getting fucked around in a tug of war. But then when you look at actually who was imposing on, for example, on Germany, the Greens sort of program of no coal, no nuclear, no timber, only things that haven't been invented yet. How that passes muster? Like, how does the public get behind this thing?
Right.
Well, you have them all fucking virtue signaling at the supermarket and where they don't fucking smile at each other and there's nothing painted on the walls because they don't want to stimulate your appetite when you're in the store because, there's some regulation against marketing. And then, you're walking around with some fucking burlap sack and shit with your, fucking patchouli oil, deodorant and stuff. And then, and people think, and that means that you're good. Because something happened, Tom, and you man of your background, man of my background, we'll appreciate that something happened like with Anglo-Saxon culture in America and in England, that you're a good or bad person based upon like what political party or what present thing you ascribe to.
Agreed.
Like, that's fucking insane, dude. Like in Greece and Italy, like all around the world, people are like, oh, you're a conservative, oh, you're liberal, whatever, and it's like whatever. Have a beer, talk. Maybe we have business to do. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, maybe we have a friendship to build. Maybe we're neighbors. Like, there's a lot of things going on here. Maybe our kids are getting married, like there's a lot of things going on here that just are missing. I'm in trying to untangle the culture, man.
No, I know. It's really funny. I was having the same discussion with Alexander Mercouris and Crypto Rich the other day about England. And in many ways about what's going on and about this like dichotomy that you're a good person if you're a Tory or a bad person if you're
right.
And the same thing happens here in the United States. When you listen to the rhetoric that comes out of these hardcore Democrats, and they're like, the GOP hates people. Like, do you understand? Like like they say this stuff with a straight face and they mean it. Like full. I mean, they've been saying it since I'm like 10 years old. They've been saying Republicans hate people. Democrats care about people. Republicans hate people. and they just keep, and it's like imprinting. I'm like, and they just, you're like, really? You really honestly believe that? And then we get to a point where you have these news stories of people not wanting to be saved from wildfires by conservatives in California. And you're like,
the rhetoric,
because it couldn't possibly be that these people are showing up out of the goodness of their heart and has to make some political statement. I'm like, no, that's just deep psychological projection on your part, that everything you do is a reflection of your desire to only ever make political statements with every action you take. Maybe they're just showing up because, someone's in danger and they need help. And even if they are making a political statement, shut the fuck up and eat the sandwich because you're starving. Like, get over yourself. Maybe you could both could like stop trying to influence each other ideologically and maybe just treat each other like, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I say
it's crazy.
people,
I mean, it's like a heuristic. It's a weird heuristic and litmus test for if you're a good person, and that's not at all how people interact in the real world. I mean, that's not at all even appropriate, and you're going to wind up real fast like regretting that you were involved in that kind of politics, because the way that the direction that goes is ugly. We're talking about
it's really
from lampposts and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, the real persecutions go down from that rhetoric. I mean, that's
and that's what
I mean, you have people being prosecuted from the war in Rwanda between the Tutsis and Hutus, right? And you have people who were just on the radio making like, oh, these people are cockroaches, ha ha ha, and they were tried for saying that stuff on the radio, just that these other people are cockroaches.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is we live in a weird time, because I mean, I guess, like in the sort of a sense of my dispositions, my traits, I'm more liberal, more open, my traits, but when I look at the cult of conformity, they're trying to classify me as a conservative because I just can't be forced to agree with things that they are promoting, that they're promoting. Like, how can my definition be defined by I refuse to get vaccinated? No, I didn't refuse to get vaccinated. You see what I'm saying? Right. Like, I'm not something.
How about this? We've just gotten to the point now where you know how desperate they are. Everybody with the right of Karl Marx himself is a Nazi. That's where we are.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're definitely.
And when you've done that, you've done that. Your movement doesn't have long to live. So, and I think
they're eating their own.
I think we're going to.
Before you kick me off your show, man, I just wanted to, it was. I'm doing the New Resistance Telegram, and I've just been canceled from a lot of platforms in the past for nothing, just covering stuff. And the people who know me know how I feel about the world and the people in it, and my love for them all. So it's just, I know that things are baseless, but that's how they do the persecution thing. Mm-hmm. And that's all good. So they're on Telegram, New Resistance. I recommend Tom to people all day long, myself, and also try to forward. I know you're have like a online, like a discussion group on your Telegram, but it's not where you've invested the most.
No, I don't invest much of it. There's mostly.
But they talk about you and stuff in there. By the way, but no, in your forum they talk about you. But yeah, no, it's and we're covering like the conflict in Ukraine and looking at the big changes that are happening geopolitically, geoeconomically. The role of gold was big in kind of how things have been shaping up and calling the bluff on Europe. So, I mean, it's I like coming back on here. Hope to come back again.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah, I don't like to have guests on the same guest on very often.
No, it's retarded to do
but
that.
Yeah, like every 3 months or so, I want to check in and just do the thing and see where we are, because this podcast is really for my own edification more than there's anything else. So trust me on this one. I mostly just like to talk to the people that I like to talk to. So, and you're certainly one of those people on that list. So, Joaquin, thank you very much for this morning. I just, just to kind of tie a bow around this, you can see all the things that we've talked about today are all coalescing around all of these big events that are happening between now and the midterm election in the United States. And I really do see that like this late September area there's going to be a jumping off point for a lot of new narratives that are going to have to be spun, and a lot of old narratives are going to die. And I firmly believe there's going to be some kind of October spasm in the
Or
markets.
die violently. So sometimes those narratives collide with other narratives, and you watch them. It's like watching a train wreck. It's
that mimetic collapse kind of thing that occurs in a lot of people, and they go, "That's not the story I thought I was following."
Not at all.
Like, exactly. So, my good man, thank you very much for your time this morning, and we'll talk again soon. And you be well.
Thanks, Tom. See you.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 114 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. If you like what you heard today, give a like, give a subscribe, send it out to your friends, do the thing. You know how it is. So you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. We'll be back again soon with someone at some point. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.